this is an opportunity to ask magazine editors and reviewers questions about the magazine, how we review products, and also to offer suggestions for how to make the magazine better. So I'm Robert Harley, editor-in-chief of The Absolute Sound, and our panelists today are David Clark of Positive Feedback down at the end, David Robinson, the editor of Positive Feedback. In the middle is John Atkinson, the editor of Stereophile. Next to him is Mr. Analog Michael Fremer of Stereophile. To my left, Paul Cedar of The Absolute Sound. And on the far left, Neil Gator of The Absolute Sound. So we'd like to open up to questions for you. Who wants to be first?
Otherwise, we're going to sing.
Go for it.
Actually, we're all cowbells, so if you don't.
Cowbells and cell phones, smaller than 21st century.
Okay, let's go.
Puzzled about this.
I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
When you talk about how do you pick equipment for a review?
Shows like this, one thing to electronic shows.
Can you speak in the mic?
Shows like this, we walk around and see things that are interesting. Maybe we haven't seen it before. Consumer electronic shows, that's really a great way to hear and see things.
Doing things at retailers. I mean, I think all of us do presentations every now and again at retailers, and that's also an opportunity to hear new equipment.
Recommendations from readers. They send you emails and say, hey, if you heard the song, you got to hear that. They're usually wrong, but we they frequently turn us into very good things.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it is that we do go to shows for a reason, quite apart from smiling at everybody. All of us on our kind of scattered mission. We all have a common passion. All of us love the same things that you do. That's why we're all here. And so we're here to take our experience and gain the impressions and see if we can scout out something that looks good. Because if it sounds good in the show conditions, we know something's probably happening.
There's a filtering process that happens before products end up in the magazine, and usually the first line is the show here. So as he was saying, that we listen to products at the show, and if it sounds good at the show, then it's probably a candidate for review.
Yeah, I hate to be glib and completely superficial and all the rest of it, but I will frankly tell you the principal reason I come to shows is social. There's a lot of people I see here whom I like a lot. I never get to see them at any other time than coming to the shows, including, for example, someone like Robert, who is my editor, and who basically I have an email relationship with, except when we see each other. I mean, same with Michael Fremer, who lives all the way across the country, and
The good part of the country.
yeah, yes, the good part. Be careful about that.
I live down here. I know about this.
You know, in any event, and also beyond that, I think it's important you get to meet with designers, you get to meet the manufacturers, and when I said I was only being partially facetious when I said it was superficial, I mean, the reality is that the pursuit of any kind of hobby or avocation or passion or whatever you want to call it is, I think, a social, it's a social concept. It's something you do and you share with other people. And to me, that's a very important part of it.
So.
Excuse me, I just come for the free stuff.
Well, some of it too is that the easiest way to handle the logistics of reviewing is to do it face-to-face and direct. Don't underestimate the amount of time it takes any of us to actually put together what it takes to have a calendar, a schedule, who's doing what, with where, what, and whom. It takes a lot of work, and it's a lot faster if you can do it face-to-face.
Well, plus on the more practical side of it, Robert mentioned here that, we get together with designers and reviewers and audiophiles and retailers, and Neil whispers under his breath to me, retailers, who are they? What are they? I mean, as we all know, it's getting more and more difficult to hear anything. I mean, we counsel in the magazine all the time. Don't take our word for it, listen to it. You'd have to be insane to pay a lot of money for something without listening to it. Where do you do it these days? I mean, one of the few places you get to do it these days are these regional shows.
So, what are the costs of your home system?
turntable cost more than my car. It was the best thing I ever bought. I have no regrets.
About a year ago, I added up all the stuff in my listening room, and it was more than $500,000.
Yeah.
Well, I happened to have the Sonos Faber loudspeakers at the time, which were $200, and then I had the Constellation Electronics that were $200,000 for a preamp and power amp, so that.
No, I meant the stuff that you actually own. Not the reviewed.
Well, I actually,
Zero.
yeah.
I own nothing in my listening room.
I pay and I buy, and I think everybody in this business should buy and own something. I believe that. I don't care if it's, you can afford an inexpensive system, you should own something in this business because you're supported by it and you should support it. That's my own belief.
And until my daughter started at NYU last fall, I budgeted to spend around $5,000 a year on equipment for my own system.
And as my wife and I are both public school teachers, so the magazine is something we spend a lot of time on, but because our funds are so limited and we're paid so outrageously well, that if I buy anything, I have to figure out how to find that money before I can buy it. So it's like,
My dogs are in
Very
college. I have no children. My dogs are in college. They cost more than most children in college. Yes, my wife. That's what she spends her money.
This was sort of like one question was asked last year, and I sort of, I don't know if I made the mistake, but I certainly revealed that at the time, and in fact it is still true today. I own only one turntable. I managed to find about 4 years ago an ARXA, an Acoustic Research ARXA turntable, brand new, had never been opened. And I bought that and I put a Shure pickup in it. I have in the past owned some really wonderful turntables. The trouble is, I do not live in a palatial house. I mean, I live in a nice house and so forth in Cheviot Hills in West Los Angeles. You add up all the other equipment that is in the house and so forth. Right now, I've got 2 turntables in there in addition to the other turntables, plus some other pieces of equipment. There is I don't know where I would put a turntable, an elaborate turntable that I own. And the other thing is, I hate to say it, most of the time I think I wouldn't wind up listening to it. Because I don't know how many people here do this as a full-time profession. I think you do, Michael.
You do?
Yes, and Robert does, I think. And I don't. Neil does. Robert doesn't. Most reviewers I know of this equipment don't do it as a full-time kind of thing. So most of the time, I mean, I'll give you another guilty secret. One of the reasons why I review so few speaker systems is that I so like the speaker systems that I own, and most of the ones I get in for review I don't like as much, and I don't want to spend the time I have to spend listening to those rather than listen to mine, so I'd rather do other kinds of review.
Well, I review stuff.
What's that?
So you pawn them off on
I pawned some of them off on Robert.
I think it's important to review things that maybe you won't like as much as what you own, because not everybody can afford what you own if you own something really expensive. So I reviewed some.
Mine is relatively modest.
I reviewed some very small speakers last month. Well, they're $8,000 a pair, which is not inexpensive, but compared to what I own, and I like them a lot, and I like them a real lot. And I said that when I went into the review, the way I think a Republican might go into sex, which is not for enjoyment, but just for reproduction. And that was a joke. It was a big for a joke, and but it was for fun. I did mean it, but I said I didn't mean it. And I was surprised by how much I loved those speakers that were much less expensive than what I own, that don't go down as low, but were a wonderful thing. So it's a learning experience, too, to take in something that's less expensive than what you own.
There's always a problem, I mean, for reviewers, is that you want to keep as much the same as possible, and like Michael, I purchase the stuff I want to use as a long-term reference. However, those long-term references then will eventually get out of date. But at the same time, if you have too much system churn by all new components coming in all the time, then you lose sort of your basis for your value judgments. So those two forces you're constantly battling as a reviewer: system churn versus system stability. And I think we all solve that in a different way for us.
Yeah, well, I would say, relative just to what John has said there, I agree with that up to a point, but I would hope that most of us who review have some reference beyond a piece concerts a lot, nightclubs, whatever it is you go to hear as you reference to live music, if you play it in your home or whatever. I mean, I would get a little nervous having to think that I need a piece of equipment, and I'm not suggesting that these gentlemen do, I'm just saying, my own part, I get a little nervous if I'm always likening something to a piece of equipment, even if that can be helpful as a sort of guide. I would rather like to think that, you know, the last time I went to Disney Hall, which I do frequently, that's more or less something that I'm listening to.
I agree at the very top end of the market, Paul. The problem is that if you have cost and object products where the designer has had all the resources he needs to throw at the design, you can say, how does this perform in absolute terms? The difficulty for reviewers is when you're given, say, a $500 CD player. You know it's not going to be perfect. You know the designer has not had the build budget to make it perfect. So what you as a reviewer have to do, in my opinion, is to judge the compromises he's made, not only against the absolute sound of live music, but also against the compromises made by competing products, and then outline those compromises so readers can decide for themselves, does that fit my needs? Or, I mean, especially in loudspeakers, the easiest way to make a very good loudspeaker less expensive is to throw away 1 or 2 octaves of bass, or 5, 10, 15 dB of ultimate loudness capability. So, if you judge it against the absolute sound of live music, all you can really say is, well, it doesn't measure up. But you have made, that designer has made compromises to make that product as good as he can at a price, and the reviewer has to draw attention to those compromises, I think. So then the concept of reference products has to come into it.
Right. But I also make the point that I've made in past years, that audio itself is an art form. And because audio itself is an art form, I never, and I mean never, say the only ultimate reference is live music. I don't. You want live music? Go to live music. Support live music. Audio is an independent experience. And the reason we love it so is for all of the things that set it apart from live music. The fact that the obvious stuff like repeatability, but there were artisans involved in making that great piece of work. And part of what we're trying to do is to speak that back into being in our listening room. We want to have some sort of emotional connection with men who are dead. They're in our rooms. I can still listen to Reiner. I can still listen to Stokowski. That's one of the greatest blessings of modern times, is the fact that we have that. And so I don't try to do that. I think John's right as far as the compromises that are inherent in designs, but we all understand that. If I read the original question correctly, how do we handle that in our own budgets? We do just like you do. We buy what we can afford, the things that really move us. I used to own a really nice, unique Porsche. I now own a Walker Proscenium Level 3 turntable. I don't own a Porsche, okay? We're like you. Ultimately, we've got to decide the things that we must have, the things that are really clever, and then we spend money on them, guys. Finally, as far as editing go, the way that we fill in the dots and increase the resolution for all of you is, we're not writing all this. We have other writers. We have other people. We have enough writers with different points of view, different price points, different lifestyles. And in each issue, we give you all those viewpoints. You find the ones that speak to you, the scouts you like, because they're scouting reports is what they are. Find the scouts.
That's all they are. They're not navel gazing professionals. What something really sounds like is, what the room is like. We don't know what your tastes are.
Exactly.
Somebody
can never answer the question, is it worth it? Only you can answer that question.
Somebody complained yesterday, you don't review enough things negatively. And I think all of us try to filter out the things that are really bad. Why waste time on things that are really bad, unless they've been called really good someplace else, then you might want to get into it. But if things are really inadequate and incompetent, you don't want to waste an article telling you that something's really incompetent, and that when you can review something else that's really good that you want people to know about.
You're all, even though you're editors as well, most of you, you're also still reviewers, and you've heard, countless products over, many years of experience. As writers, reviewers, how do you keep it fresh in for every review, not repeating what you said before, and not using, well, I've heard $500 CD players. How do you keep it so it excites you and the reader?
You're right. My jaw dropped when I heard it. The greatest part about writing is when you know you have to say it a different way, and you rearrange the synapses in your brain, and you find a different way to say it that elevates you personally to a different level. You feel you've achieved something on your own. It's written better.
You stare at the screen until beads of blood appear on your forehead.
Do you still do that? Do you still feel excited with your reviews?
Yeah,
You go, wow,
Absolutely. And it
Yes.
shows too, when I read other reviewers, or in the Absolute Sound or other magazines, you can really tell when a reviewer is excited about a product, and when it's just, oh yeah, it's another review, you know, it's a confident product, or when he's really, really thrilled. And the really exciting reviews, the exciting products are much easier to write about than about mixed products.
What I tried to do, my first review was published 30 years ago in Hi-Fi News. What I tried to do in that review was bring out the character of the product I'm writing about by my choice of the recordings I mentioned in that review. And in the 30 years since, I found that is a way of keeping my enthusiasm high for what I'm writing about, because I'm actually basically, the equivalent of what I'm doing in writing a review is asking you guys over to my house and taking a listen to my music. And that's like the most fun thing to do. We all have that experience, right?
Yeah.
And that's the paradigm of my review. I'm saying, hey, come over, listen to this, and listen to these recordings that I think sound great on this product.
I actually invite people over to hear my system.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to do that.
I don't know many, I actually have listening panels myself, but in answer to your question, which I think is a good one, I often find actually that precisely what you say is a good index to how I'm feeling about the product, you know, and then you kind of, I mean, if really I'm having trouble writing about it, it's sort of an indication that, you know, maybe the initial enthusiasm I felt is worn off. I mean, sometimes there was one product recently that I just finally wrote to Robert and said, look, if I'm going to have to review this, it's really going to be a ho-hum review. I just don't want to waste time on it. So I just didn't review the product. And you know, sometimes another way, one of my favorite kinds of reviews to write is a product that I really like a lot, vis-a-vis what's been said here, and yet I don't think it's accurate, or there's some aspect of it that gives me a problem. I really enjoy the process of wrestling with that process and kind of sharing it with the reviewer, or with the readers, because I think almost in anything we want to buy, let's say, well, hell's bells, anybody we might want to marry or have a friend or go out with or a fan. I mean, how often is it just absolutely perfect? I mean, we're always, yes, there you go. And I would say the same thing, but going beyond that, I mean, to me, that's actually part of what keeps the job interesting, you know, and exciting, because you know, going off the bat, it's not going to be perfect. Nothing is.
Well, I think too, one other thing, that a lot of this is storytelling. And this is one of the reasons, for example, John and I were talking yesterday, why I enjoy Art Bell so much, for example. Or Clark Johnson, or some of the other folks. There's some very fine writers out there who get well outside the envelope. You'll hear about their lives, you'll hear about their stories. Here's what moves me now. Here's what's going through my mind while I'm listening to the music. And as editors, I know that one of the delights we have is in finding really great writing where it's not just blah, 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 another boilerplate review. I just published one of my higher end columns in which I'm talking about my life with reel to reel. I mean, that takes me all the way back to when I was 16. And so you're not going to learn a whole lot about the reel to reel recorders that I'm going to talk about the next time around. Instead, you get to hear about me so that you know why the hell I care about reel-to-reel recorders so passionately. And I think all of us tell stories. We're all storytellers. And you know, if you like great writing, you'll recognize it when you see it. If you see somebody who's just dialing it in, another one of those boring, up-the-ass stories about how blah, blah, blah sounded very little like something else, or of all the many CD players ever heard, this is another one. You know, this is what sets us apart. Really fresh writing, and for the creative writing, and in this area we're writing as artists. It's the same problem every artist faces. How can I communicate the passion? The sun rose today, and how can I not sound like what I did yesterday?
What keeps my enthusiasm up is that products at every price point continually get better.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you know, a $2,000 CD player today is so much better than one of last year, and, you know, I've been following digital for 23 years, and
I've been disliking it very
it's
Michael's
continually
been
getting
running
better.
away from digital.
Or I could use vinyl as an example. Phono cartridges and turntables, phono stages, is constantly getting better, so there's that enthusiasm that people can get more for their money.
What challenges or changes are you seeing in your readership?
Well, a challenge is the, well, and it's actually not a challenge, it's a real sort of buzz that so many young people are finding their way to our magazines.
They are.
I hope you're right, John, because you point them out to me at the show.
Well,
There's one young kid who's at community college. He came last year and went to my seminar and enjoyed it, and he said you were a very impressive man, which I really enjoyed hearing. My wife never says that. And this year he came back, and he goes to community college. He schlepped his stereo into his community college, which was a big pass amplifier and some Magnecan speakers, and he invited all the kids to come and listen to his stereo, and he said they were just blown. They'd never heard anything like this. They almost said a cliche, I stopped myself. And this is incredible. That someone with that kind of passion, he's like 18 or 19 years old or 20, that he would schlep his stereo to his college and play stuff. He let them play their iPod, then he played the real CDs versus the iPod. And they saw speakers that were this thick and came out of both sides, and I never saw anything like this. And they all walked away buzzed. And you know, to have an emissary like somebody to come along and promote this on his own without making money out of it, it's fantastic.
You know,
Just one kid.
thing, Michael, though. I mean, you know, it actually changed their lives.
I'm sure it did. I bet you it did. Just that's how how did you find it about? So I went to a friend's house.
Music actually, quite literally.
That's a different. I saw Joan Baez live when I was 16 years old. I had never seen a group of women standing around with hair under their arms, and that changed my life in a lot of ways. The music was good also. And then I heard a good stereo for the first time, and it was like, oh my God, okay, and that's how I got into it. It changed everything.
This gentleman here has a question.
First of all, I want to thank all of you, especially Mr. Atkinson, Mr. Fremer, and Mr. Harvey, for great reviews. I'm fairly new to this hobby, about 7-8 years ago.
Get out while you can. I'm sorry.
And really, reading your reviews and the magazines actually helped me, learn or identify, first of all, what to listen to in terms of, picking a speaker, cabinet resonances, what's an extended high, what's the low frequency. And so I want to thank you for that. But reading many of your reviews throughout the years, I've noticed in certain examples or in certain cases, some reviewers, fall in love with a product, be it a CD player or a speaker or whatever. And subsequent reviews of those products, I've noticed that once they've fallen in love with that one particular product, the other products, although the same price range or similar technologies, don't quite add up. So how do you break away from those?
Do you mean a brand? You said
Well,
you
no.
product. Do you mean a brand, other products from the same company?
No, let's say a CD player. No, not particularly a brand. So a generic.
well, I mean, we're all brought up to be monogamous, and we all fall in love. And the thing that it's very hard to break out of that is to realize that when it comes to audio equipment, you can have mistresses. You can be in love with this amplifier, but that doesn't preclude you from also being in love with this amplifier. Try it with women. No, that's dangerous. But with hi-fi equipment, you can be really promiscuous.
Well, and I think part of the challenge is that the things that you really love, you'll stay with. That's going to be home base for you until something comes along that really moves you a little bit further. Just as a specific example, in my case, when I first encountered the EMN lab stuff for SACD and DSD, I mean, that just knocked me out. I mean, I knew the difference, I knew the improvement, and I said so. And first chance I got, I owned one. And I kept that for 6 years. That was the standard, and any time I looked at other players, it was always, no, this is very good, but what I have here is better. Until Playback Designs came along, and as soon as I heard the MPS-5, I said, damn. Now, 6 years later, here it is.
Yeah.
It's better. Ed doesn't talk to me anymore. But, you know, I mean, that's
always a problem. You're always afraid you're going to offend somebody that's become your friend, or somebody who's really nice has a product that's really bad, and you have to say so, or someone who's really, I don't want to use the word, but I think of them, but their product is great. You have to forget it, separate those two things out.
Yeah, I would though have to take it one step further. I mean, I obviously was reading audio reviews before I became a reviewer, and I just continue to read my colleagues now. And I'd have to tell you quite frankly, I wouldn't trust any critic, anybody who sets himself or herself up as a critic in any endeavor, what it is, whether it's movies or books or wine or what's the best fast food hamburger. I don't care what it is. I wouldn't trust any critic who doesn't fall in love with certain. I mean, somebody asked earlier, what keeps you going? That's what keeps you going. I mean, you know, I'll never forget when the first time I read some Macintosh gear, well, Robert Greene came over and he said, you know, I can't tell you how good it makes me feel to see those blue meters in your room. And I feel the same way. And there's certain kinds of equipment I'll see. How do you know what you want? Sometimes I just look at it and say, man, is that ever cool? I would like to have that in just so I can, forgive the sexual illusion, operate those knobs, feel those knobs, etc. And it's fine, yes, you have that for a while. And what I can simply say is that, I don't wish this to sound antagonistic, but if you as a reader don't like that in me or us, I don't actually care if I have you as a reader. I mean, I would want to have a reader who would be similar, who feels similarly passionate about the subject. What are we here for?
I think most readers are that way.
Yeah.
You know, only the drones ones. What do I buy and how much does it cost? Tell me what I should get.
There was a reviewer for Stereo Review who wrote an extraordinary editorial in about 1998 before that magazine morphed into Sound and Vision. And he wrote an editorial saying, you know, hi-fi equipment has reached a plateau. There really isn't much point in talking about it. I think there are better things to spend your money on. And I thought, oh my goodness, what is this man doing? Writing about audio for a living, if that is how he really feels. You know this man, he's the one who you visited his house, and he had most amazingly beautiful house.
Oh, yeah, this is an extremely wealthy man.
But it cheaped out completely on his audio.
Yeah, he was so happy to have. He has the finest wine, he had the finest cars, he had cut stone circular driveway. He had a separate building where the stereo was on 2 floors. It was in a Faraday cage. It was on springs where the studios. And inside it, I'm serious, connected up with Lamport with 2 big Snell speakers, very old, but those were good. And DVX Electronics, he said he was proud of these. I bought these when they went out of business. A cheap preamp and a cheap amplifier and an AR turntable, which was okay, you know, 30 years ago. And he put a record on. I said, I'll play you a record. You want a record? I said, that's in mono. He's a good call. The cartridge was wired in mono. Good call. I said, well, we're coming out of the center. How can we miss that? And this is a guy who has all this great stuff in his whole life. Even if you don't think it sounds any different, wouldn't want to own something that's beautifully made just on that level. And this is a real mental problem. Don't write about this anymore. Get out of it. It sounds true. That CDs sound perfect, and you don't need any more resolution. Can you imagine someone in video saying 480i is great? You know, NTSC television, that's all you need.
Or in wine, you know, the wine critics saying, you know, Thunderbird's pretty good. There's not much point in having it. Like, what? If you don't have that passion, why are you in this business? On the subject of, if I can just interrupt, Michael said about, you know, offending manufacturers and designers who you think of as friends. Robert Hardy wrote a fantastic editorial many years ago in Stereophile called But I Thought You Were My Friend, where a manufacturer responds like that to a review that Robert had written. And yes, there are people in this industry I respect, I like, I admire, and it wouldn't stop me from writing an honest review of their product if I thought it was failing in some area.
But when the owner of a company recently thanked me for a review, I said, don't thank me, thank your designers.
Exactly.
This gentleman had a
It's
question.
kind of a good segue from what you said, John. My question is, over the years as I've read all your magazines, I've come to learn how to read between the lines when a reviewer is trying to say he doesn't like something. And sometimes it's different, because sometimes I don't know if it's a mission, like on purpose, or is it a mission because I don't want to talk about that aspect of it.
Sometimes it's in your head too, because I read what you wrote, you didn't, I said, no, that's exactly what I meant, there's nothing.
But that's going to be my question. How do we clarify that? Because sometimes, you know, when you were talking about...
You have to go into therapy. When you finish with the therapy, then you
not all of us have your money, so have to find a way. I'm looking for a way, maybe, if we can communicate, or, you know, you don't even touch some of those bad...
Well, that's a fair question. The difference between nuance and somebody playing hide and go seek with the readers. Ultimately, a lot of that lies with the editors who might see that. I've had reviews sent to me where I get back to them and I say, you're damning this person with really faint praise. Really, really faint praise. Or everything's fine right up to the point that you said, except for this thing right here that sucks. Okay? So you have to, if it's going to be a review that's not favorable, say so. You know, just come out and say it. I'd rather that you say this thing really sucks and it's a piece of bullshit, than have somebody dance around and I read it and I say I don't even know what you're saying and I'm an editor.
But do you think that's really what's happened? Again, maybe I'm just imagining.
So why make a value judgment rather than saying here's what it sounds like and let people come to their own conclusion about well that's something I wouldn't want to hear. You know?
As an editor, you see this happening in the review process, that you get the first draft of the review and you get the damning with faint praise, the equivocation on the part of the reviewer. And it's actually very often not good writing. And so what you're aware of is that what the writer has is a cognitive dissonance. He feels he ought to like the product, but actually he doesn't. So it's reflected in his writing. So I guess like all editors here, we do show and tells with our writers. I visit Michael once a month, partly to hear his system, which sounds magnificent, but also for me to say, so Michael, how do you think this? How do you think this sounds? And he describes it to me, and I listen. And if I don't hear it as he hears it, we talk about it. Most of the time,
He hits me.
But I mean, you know, it's part of the process of creating the review. That's the role of the editor, is to work these things out with his or her writers, to get them to be more true to their inner feeling.
Exactly, and that's what I mean by nuance. And I know John understands this inherently, that it's okay to write a judicious review. I won't publish a trash-in review. A trash-in review I define as something where somebody says this thing is absolutely atrocious, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if I were going to spend a lot of time doing that, I'd have to be a lot more exhaustive in our methodology than we are. I'd have to start running it past multiple reviewers, et cetera. Is this really bad? Or did somebody really just goof up? It's a bad synergy. But instead, I don't mind a judicious review. If a reviewer will clearly state limitations without turning them into damnation,
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
then we're fine. I think all of us are fine
That's
with
what it
that.
should be.
It's actually easy to write a review of something which doesn't appear to have any problems. It's much more difficult when there are problems. I mean, first you have to define what the problems are. Is it the component? Is it me? Is it the system? Is it the ancillary products? Is it the room?
Yes.
And you have to, so it becomes a much longer process of eliminating variables to work out, is your disappointment in what you're hearing actually part of that product's character? And then, if it is, then you have to describe it
Exactly.
in a way without, say, being overly judgmental. You know, this speaker has no bass below 30 hertz, therefore it's rubbish. It's like, well, why doesn't it have any bass below 30 hertz? Is there a benefit somewhere else that's been gained? And writing reviews like that is takes much lengthier process than just writing a rave of the product, which every recording you put on illustrates something more you like about it.
Well, Clark Johnson once wrote an essay for us, and the title of the essay was Why I Do Not Review Audio Equipment. And in it, Clark listed 22 or more things that he believed had to be right before you could be really conclusive in anything you were saying about something in your room. And while you might argue one way or another with it, I thought that the point was essentially well taken. In other words, if, and we know this in science, if there's a null finding, that's not necessarily indicative. All it means is something didn't happen in this room. But what we're in the business of trying to tell you about is where the gold is, not where the gold ain't. Because there are too many factors in a given room that might lead to a less than optimal result. That being true, and since none of us can afford the logistics and the time, and we're not going to throw millions of dollars at this, we do the best we can with what we have in our rooms. We find the best people, make sure that nothing really obviously bad is happening, and then we live within those envelopes and try to get you the truest story, a scouting report, so that you can say, well, wait a minute, he said he really found something great there.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing somebody said earlier, that is, what is the best speaker? We often get asked. Well, what do you want? What are your needs? And I mean, there is no best speaker. It's only the one which best matches your own specific set of needs. So our role is to describe what a speaker or a product does, so that you can then look at our review and go, well, the reviewer said that the speaker has no low bass, but that's not important to me, because what's important to me as an audiophile is all I play is chamber music and female voice. So I don't play organ recordings, I don't play techno, I don't play Kanye West, so I don't need low bass. But yeah, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, John. I was just going to say there's also another category of reviewer product we haven't talked about here, but and it's, one of the things I try to do, or at least I think I like to think I try to do, and perhaps most of us here do in one way or another, is also to get beyond our own personal tastes or biases. I mean, I have had products to review that I have not cared for the sound of these products, but I do realize they have been made for a specific taste, and I'm not sure that I necessarily consider it's my business to cast aspersions on that. So in fact, you will find me dancing around any kind of assessment of what the sound is once I think I've tried to describe it adequately or accurately in any case. And so, I mean, sometimes I will be quite critical of something, and other times I'm just thinking, look, there is a market for this, and it's a legitimate market. I'm not talking about flaky people. There's a certain kind of flavor of speaker systems now that is very, 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 very fashionable that I don't happen to care for, and usually I try not to review them, but if I do, I have to be mindful about saying, this is a mistake, as opposed to, no, this has been specifically designed to do this.
The least important thing in a review is whether we really like something, as far as I'm concerned. The most important thing is describing what it sounds like, because you might like it. In the end, I would say, well, it's something I really like, but it doesn't matter. My favorite letters are people say, well, I know what you like, and I don't like anything you like, but I read the review, I know that I would like that because you described it in a way that tells me what it sounds like. That's great.
Right. Well, like, for example, Dave Clark reviews all sorts of music that are not those kinds of music. I mean, there are all sorts of projects that I would float towards Dave, because Dave's listening to the techno pop and all the rest of that. You go to Dave's and you can watch Michael Mercer rock all day long until he finally collapses in a drunken stupor. So this is fun. Oh, it's great fun. I mean, this is why we have multiple voices.
Yeah, you mentioned an extended high.
Well, I mean, that's it. It's all part of the community. That's why we have many voices and many modes. That's why synergies extend all the way to the point of the reviewer. I have all sorts of gear I won't route to certain reviewers. My God, that'd be a waste. I send SETs over there. That's going to be a waste of time. I mean, Dr. Sardonicus is going to laugh his ass off if I send him certain kinds of things. Okay, I know what to send him. And so this is going to be how we reach the younger guys too, by the way. Because we are working to extend the voices to the new musical forms that are there. And I have long since, like a couple of decades ago, flushed the idea that that acoustic was going to be it, or that was the ultimate. That's where I separated the art form from the experience of live music, because I said, you cannot get Sgt. Pepper's away from me. It ain't happening. There are audio works, recordings that exist that are art forms themselves. The hell with the fact that they were never played live. I don't care. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, do I care? I want it. It's an art form. It's a massive, major masterwork. And we need voices that keep moving down into all of the latest alternative, techno-pop, the rest. Because otherwise we are going to be a bunch of old white guys that are just going to die out. That's what's going to happen.
We are anyway.
Oh no, that's okay. Hey, I may be getting gray, but I ain't old. And the fact is that we need to connect with those guys because they care about their music passionately. It's just that if we don't build a bridge to them, they have no idea as to what quality is.
And we have to understand that we have different tastes in music. My editorial assistant, Ariel Bitran, is 23 years old. And the music he listens to. Oh, anyway, but he wrote a really nice piece on our website about the fact that at the New York show 2 months ago, he had gone into a room and wanted to play a Fish recording. Now, I actually do like Fish. But the exhibitor was appalled. How can you play that? This is music with no dynamic range. Don't play that. This is not music. And I thought, what a stupid man.
I know.
You know, because Ariel's passion is for Fish. He wanted to hear Fish on a really good system. And isn't that what it's about?
Yeah, too many notes, Mozart.
Just as a point of information about young people, anybody care to comment about people in this room? Relative to the youth? I mean,
I would say
I don't think we're getting to them.
I would say with 1 or 2 exceptions, everyone in this room is younger than me.
No,
And I'm a year younger than Michael.
I age younger than me doesn't rule out too many people, but no, seriously, I mean, going around the show, the first thing that struck me was almost everyone here is
But a lot of that has to do, I was going to say, a lot of that has to do is how we market this and how we reach out to people. One of the things, yesterday, we have 2 writers that are 19 and 20, and they were here, first time they've been to a show, and they write music reviews, and they're really good at what they do, and they're just kind of like walking around. I said, what do you think? They go, this is like not what I thought it would be like, And, they'd be here today, but,
They were freaked out.
No, they're trying to get, they're working hard to say, gee, can I really buy that $500 pair of speakers,
Right.
To them, that's a lot of money.
I went to a hi-fi show in Poland last November that 6,000 people showed up, and the audience was significantly younger than this audience. And I think you find that in Asia as well. Much younger,
I was at the Munich show a month ago, and it's a much younger audience. I wrote an editorial recently about a New York retailer. The guy came in with his iPod and wanted to hear a good system, and the retailer threw him out of the store and said, "Don't ever come back to the
Is
store."
that Andy?
Yeah. Not
He threw me out of the store because we had an iPod on the cover. I went into the store to take a picture, and he said, "Get out of my store! You put an iPod on the cover. You don't do us any good. Get out of here!" And he threw me out of the store.
So the essay said instead of throwing the guy out of the store, he should have had a huge sign in the front that said, "Bring in your iPod for an unforgettable experience." So you walk in and there's a chair with a little system with some mini monitors and a cable that comes out to his iPod. So the guy brings his iPod in, he plays his own music, he controls the demo, he controls the level, what he listens to. So we're bringing our experience to him, to his world, not expecting him to make the leap to our world.
That's right.
Yeah, but I am absolutely confident that audio as an art form is going to flourish without us and despite us. The power that all of us know, and I feel absolutely passionate about this, is going to reach them. Because they're actually doing all the audio all the time. They just haven't learned about quality.
That's right.
Quality you learn in time. Damn, don't you remember what you were surviving with in high school and college? I worked for a year to buy my first open reel machine. That's where my love of reel-to-reel came from. When I was 16, I worked for a year as a butcher's assistant to buy an open reel machine. Was it the greatest in the world? No, it wasn't an Ampex, couldn't afford it.
But you knew what was.
I knew what was good.
That's
what's going to happen. We're going to have another generation. It's just whether or not we're slamming doors in the face. I mean, if we're courteous, if we do what we should do to welcome in our brothers and sisters, the younger ones, and quit flicking stuff at what they're listening to, and just say, you know, it can sound better. We'll build bridges. They'll come. They'll come.
And we've never had a time in history when more people had more access to more music.
That's right.
Through
You know,
technology.
when the kids listen now, though, my 3 college kids, they're not just listening to music, they're doing their homework, listening to music, they're texting people, they're getting emails, they're tweeting, and they're talking to their friends there. I mean, they're doing 600 things at once. They just don't. I mean, I have a very nice system at home that I try to sit them down in front of them, and they say, wow, that's really clear, Dad, that's really great. But they still go up to their room and listen to their little...
But they're bathing in it. That's the thing. That's just like we used to sit back. I used to bathe in music. Music was just running in the background. I didn't have anybody saying, hey, quit the multitasking. Now there's stuff, when we get into a groove and when we focus, you and I both know that there's that magic zone where we can go when something emotionally enormous is happening. But I don't object to people swimming in music. There's a hell of a lot worse stuff they could be swimming in. There really is.
They'll find a time when they'll pay attention to it.
They'll pay attention. They are paying attention.
Some older ages.
Yeah, Mark.
Just a question. So on the topic you're speaking of, do you think it's a cost privilege in a lot of manners for the younger folks, 20, 22, 25, to, you know, off that kind of money?
Oh, for sure. Without a doubt.
How could it not be?
Yeah.
There were 52 kids on my dorm room floor, and only 2 had decent stereos, me and another kid. And the rest had, flip-down changes from Sears, but they came into our room to hear decent.
And I think people change. I mean, if you look at the fantastic job Beats at persuading young people to spend $300 on headphones.
Right.
I mean, in just some years back, you mentioned there was an article in the New York Times that was dissing some headphones because they cost $500. Who would ever pay that much?
It's expensive. It's pricey.
And yet, so Beats, regardless of what you think about the sound or the marketing, has educated people that if they spend more, they get more.
Yes, yes. And so I am confident, I am passionately confident. The fact that we might not know a lot of the stuff that's available via downloads now. I mean, this whole studio system is broken down. People can now reach out directly from their bedroom studio to literally millions of people all over the world. There's actually far more music out there. All we're about, all that fine audio has ever been about is making the quality connection. And they'll learn that in time.
We have time for one more question. Over here.
Getting back to the issue of reviewing any other piece of equipment, let's say speakers, for example, how could you possibly make a comparison to what you might be listening to in your listening room review? You're listening to a pair of speakers. It's happened to me countless times where I've read a great review about a pair of speakers, and then I'll go someplace and listen to those speakers and say, what the hell was he listening to? Doesn't sound like what I read in the review. You have different components, you have different room acoustics, you have different cabling. Everything is going to be different. How do you take away from the review something that's relevant to me and my home and my system with my electronics? There are so many variables.
An accurate review should give you enough to go on that when you go hear it, it sounds like that. And if it doesn't, it's either the reviewer was wrong or the dealer didn't set it up correctly. It can't sound exactly the same, but it should.
Or if your choice of equipment is so different that, that dominated the sound of the speaker. I mean, you were mentioning, Michael, about a certain speaker which you gave a great review to, but if you matched it with this particular amplifier, it would not sound good at all.
Imagine a thin sounding speaker with a thin, fast sounding amplifier. You're going to get something that's not very pleasant.
I mean, we all do list the components we use to reach our value judgments because of this very reason.
Yeah, context is everything. Synergy is everything. All that these are, and this is why all of us are, I think, generally agree. These are scouting reports. We give you the context. We all list our listening rooms. You read our stuff over years. You get a feel for what moves us, and you'll do the shows if you get an opportunity to do a cross comparison. But ultimately, only you can answer that question in your listening room. I mean, there's no really satisfactory way to say, here's how it sounds in your room. That's impossible.
But I mean, if you go, Joseph Audio Pulsar speakers, Michael reviewed recently, they were the relatively expensive speakers you like. I've listened to both rooms here at this show, and they both sound pretty much as they did in your room, despite the differences in ancillary equipment.
Yeah, or for example, the YG and Knots, the YG line. You hear them here, I would say it sounds very much like what I heard in my listening room. They have certain qualities and characteristics that are a little bit more transcendent than some other speakers I know, where you have to tweak everything and you get what you get. So some speakers seem to, as an example, seem to have that character. Or Playback Designs with the SACD playback, it does a remarkable job in any room I've ever heard it in. Other things, system matching or the amplifier speaker interface is critical. And if you go SET, it becomes even more critical.
Yeah, who would want to go down that road?
I mean, seriously, I run into people who say, I had somebody today ask me, I'm thinking about doing an integrated, and I have these speakers I'm looking at that are 87 dB watt meter, and this integrated puts out 20 watts. And I said, stop, don't go there.
I want to add that, the thing I find, because I actually subscribe to all the magazines, I pay, I read everybody, I'm always curious what everybody else is thinking. A lot of times I'm looking like, well, they're citing, certain artists, music sources, whatever. If I don't connect to it, and I take my music to audition this, I'm probably not going to get the same experience, and I may not even hear what they hear. It's not like, well, if they're only playing cello and I'm playing something else,
it plays a lot of something else.
So I mean, it's quite possibly that the way they wrote about that is they described exactly what they heard using that music, but it wasn't the music you would use. So you go and play that music, and it's like, what, these guys deaf?
Well, we're out of time, so thanks everyone for coming to